of today is all about how do we democratize data to provide better value for all. And by all, I mean individuals, businesses, services, government, society as a whole. So this is the subject of what we do in my company, DigiMe, and I'm the exec president and founder of that. But it's a fairly well-known thing now going across the world, and I would urge anybody who's very interested in what I have to say at the end of today to go to mydata.org, which is the international body looking at this area. I've been proud to be a board member for a couple of years, though I've just retired from that as I've finished my cycle. So when we're looking at this area, there's a different way which I describe it, and it's about increasing the velocity of rich personal data sharing. Now, that seems quite strange. Why velocity? Well, if we think about velocity of money, that is the value in the economy, GDP. And if we can increase the velocity of personal data sharing, there's more value for everybody in the economy. But of course, that seems at odds with everything that's going on. Privacy, my data is being robbed and everything else. And that's absolutely true. So if we're going to increase the velocity to get more value for everybody, we have to do it with full privacy, security, and consent. And these aren't two opposite things. You can share more and have privacy, security, and consent, as we say. And that is really the big difference, is that it's too often seen as two things at loggerheads, either sharing or privacy, and that need not be the case. If we actually look at all of the things here on the right-hand side, whether it's personalized health, new fintechs, consumer engagement, we need more data. So a classic example is personalized medicine, where it says medicine about you, targeted for you. Now, you need to do that. You're going to have to share your health data since you were born, advanced wearables, genomics, the food you buy and eat, and even your social data, because it's an indicator of mental state. We just can't do that today. We cannot bring that data together and share it, which means we can't meet these requirements. Now, I use the phrase rich personal data. So we ought to just do a little sojourn into what we mean by data. Let's look at what we would ideally want. If any service wanted data about an individual, what do they really want in the most ideal circumstances? And there's 5 key characteristics. And the first is we really want a single source of truth. So rather than the problems of saying, is it Julian, and the miscorrelation that can appear. The second is we want it multidimensional. I just talked in health about health, wearables, genomics, food, social. But in almost everything we do, it's rare to have a single category. Fintech often talks about having finance data, but they need a wider data to fully understand the individual and tailor products and make sure they're selling the right product to the right person at the right time. We also need longitudinal, the posh word, or deep in time. Now, it might be 1, 2, 3 months, a year, a couple of years, or lifetime because of health. The fourth seems obvious. We want data to be accurate. Well, don't we all? Yeah, we do. But it's often secondhand or inferred, and we want it from source and validated as such. And then finally, if we're going to make data, increase the velocity of data, we need to make it easy to use. Data isn't easy to use. It comes in multiple languages, and you have to know all about the oddities of the sources. You can't possibly increase the velocity of usage in that situation. It's too difficult. So we really want to bring it down to normalize all the data so that it's available to use. So we need single source, wide, deep, accurate, and normalized. Now, the problem is that, as we'll see, there's no company can bring that data together about an individual. There's none. You might think, well, Facebook's got all that data. Yeah, but they've got, take the big circle of me, they've got some social, some web browsing, some search, but they don't have my health and my wearables and my finance and purchases and so on and so forth. You can't get all of that data together today with those companies. And we know that our personal data use is being constrained, obviously strongly constrained, because we've got concerns about privacy, right? Data being tracked and stuff. The good news is companies are reacting to that as well. So we've got Apple and Google restricting on some of the advertising. Now, some might say that's for their own purposes too, but the general point is that with legislation like GDPR, CCPA in California, and other things that are going on around the world, the illegal use or the unethical, whatever word you want to use, of taking our data is disappearing. So companies are seeing that data shrink when they need it to grow. And what that means is if we had a problem getting rich data at all, which we did, we've got even more of a problem when that data which is available is being rightly constrained. So we know that no company can know everything about us, and that's primarily due to data stovepipes. It is more so also due to privacy. So we're in a real situation, a crossroads, if you like, where we want to do all these new things, but we don't have the data. So there wouldn't be much point in my having a discussion if there wasn't a way to fix this. And there's one key insight we need, and it starts from 3 critical insights. There is one entity in the whole system that knows all about you and me, and that's ourselves. Only you know all your data sources, which doctors and hospitals you are, where your bank data is, which social networks you use, etc. And you, and only you, have rights of access to a full copy of that data. And you do have rights. You've always had rights. You've now got them digitally with GDPR, which in the UK is now called, after Brexit, is now called UK GDPR, but is actually in our Data Protection Act 2018. And only you can know everything about you. And only you have unlimited usage rights in that data about you. So I can print off my health data, put it on the windows of my car and drive around. If anybody else did that, they would be done up for a privacy breach. So the key insight to solve this problem is that aggregation of rich data can only occur at the individual. It's simple as that. No company can bring all that data together. If you want it to be single source, wide, deep, accurate, normalized, it has to be at the individual. So how? How do we do that? Well, we do it using what's generically called a data facilitator or my data operator. Now that's what my company, DigiMe, is all about. That's what we do. And I'll then explain that. We are the leaders in this area, but there will be, and there are others coming up. The good news is, if you aggregate data at the individual, privacy, security, and consent will come for free, right? Because it is at the individual. And again, I'll show you how that is. So what is a typical data facilitator? Comes in 3 parts effectively. The first is you have to get the data to the individual. So you're all very familiar with an email program, which you will have on your phone. And in the email program on your phone, you download that program. You select your 2, 3, 4 email channels. You will then authenticate, username, password, maybe 2-factor once, and then a miracle happens. All of your data, your emails, appears on your phone, right? And you can see, search, and share that data. Well, DigiMe is the same. You download DigiMe to your device. You then connect, but now not to your emails, but to your bank accounts, to your social networks, to your doctor. You authenticate, and then your DigiMe will get a full copy of that data every day. So a full copy of that data comes down to you, and then you decide where to store it. It doesn't matter where you store it, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, and adding others, because your DigiMe on your device encrypts all the data with a key only held by you. And all the data is normalized as it comes through. So you end up here, well, what do you end up with? Well, it's 100% private. Nobody has seen it other than you. DigiMe does not see, touch, or hold data at any point in this. It's all edge processing. It's fully secure, it's completely decentralized, fully secure. Only you have the key, and it's thoroughly encrypted with latest technologies. And it's rich because it's single source, wide, deep, accurate from source, validated as such, and all normalized. The normalization tech that we have comes from the military work that I used to do. So now everyone in the world that you communicate with, whether that's a government, might need some data or want to share data with, whether that's apps or services, whether it's medical, financial, retail, anything, would like access to that for different value propositions, and you want to share that for that value proposition. So the other half of this equation is to have a full consent stack so that any app or service can ask you for data. But if they're going to do that, it has to be with a very clear consent certificate, which meets the bar for explicit and informed consent. And you'll see that we've met that bar and been validated as such. And all this Apple service has to do is register for a consent certificate with DigiMe. They get a token, they put that into our API, that appears on your device when you're using their Apple service. If you look at it and you say yes, your DigiMe extracts a copy of your data and passes it to the Apple service. And that Apple service may be on your phone or may be off device. And so it's very simple. These businesses get orders of magnitude better data with no more than a single call, with one proviso. You agree the very clear value proposition. Now, I'm going to come to that value proposition again later, but I'm going to say it here. It's not just about selling your data. If you have a diabetes app, for example, that's on your phone and it needs your medications and your wearables, you're going to give it that data, and you'll probably even pay for the app because the value proposition to you is it's kept you alive. So the value propositions can be many and varied. We say service, convenience, or reward, or combinations thereof. But now all data can flow with full privacy, security, and consent. The key thing here is, as well, this data facilitator, we don't know anything about you. We're completely neutral. The value propositions between you and the service or the app that you're working with, we're just your librarian and postman, but all with edge processing so that we don't see, touch, or hold your data. And as I said, your consent has to be explicit and informed. So a very clear consent certificate that works on a phone or an iPad or anything else, which says, what is it that you're sharing? Is it part of your data or all of your data? Is it one-off or an ongoing share? Will it leave your device or stay on your device? Will it be shared with third parties? If so, who and why? Will the data be kept? But you can actually see further data information. You can even see the data you're going to share before you share it. So a real high watermark for consent. And if you're happy, you take a positive action to swipe through, and then the data flows and then can carry on in the background if you've agreed. You also then have a full consent dashboard where for each consent that you've given, you've got a receipt. So you know exactly what you're doing. You can see a list of everything you've ever shared. And if it's an ongoing share, you can stop sharing at a single place to do it. So full control. So let's see this in action. I'm going to use a video. Afterwards, answering questions, I can demo it live. This all works. This isn't a theory. This is an operational platform. So let's go through here. So this is somebody who's setting up their DigiMe. It has the promise that we don't see, touch, and hold your data, which has been validated by various governments. We've done the health data for the UK, the Dutch, Iceland, and the US, and been audited for privacy, security, and safety across all of those. So the individuals set up their storage area and puts up a password for their library, right, to ensure the encryptions. So the library gets set up. They can enable notifications if they want to. Now they can synchronize and choose from a wide selection of data sources. Now they'll usually do this not by coming to DigiMe first. They'll usually do this by coming to an app or service like that diabetes app I mentioned that will get you to set up DigiMe and ask you for wearables, say, and your medications. But it doesn't matter which way you come. All you have to do is authenticate your data, and then your DigiMe will now go in the background and fetch all of your data. So here we see Twitter data is now coming, and every day your DigiMe will go and get a full copy of all of your data. And it goes back as many years as the interfaces allow. So for example, I have Twitter data going back to 2008. Here we have an app that would like your data. Now this is quite an amusing app. It's called the TFP, the effing post. The idea behind it is it's going to ask for all of your social data here, and it's going to scan that with an AI to see whether you've got any offensive posts, which you might want to clean up if you're going for a job interview or anything else, if you don't want it found that you may have been less than, shall we say, tactful in the past. So here the individual has said yes to that, has agreed the consent certificate, and the data has now come through to the app, which is now going to analyze all of those posts, 146 posts in this case, going back over 4 years, so not a heavy poster, and allow the individual to do what they want to with it. So that's how it all works. You can try it for yourself. So what this does is there's a big benefit for individuals who can now share their data under their control. And there's big benefits for businesses too, because you can now get richer, wider data than you've ever been able to do before by simply doing one thing: ask the individual. Don't have to go to data companies, don't have to worry about trying to correlate multiple sources, everything else. Have a value proposition with an individual, ask the individual, you'll get the best data for the purposes. And it's not complicated. Normally, when we think about getting data today in businesses, you've got to worry about multiple sources, how you're going to correlate it, hold it in some massive server system, how you're going to process this rather shoddy data to get out some good value information. Now, it's no more than a single consent certificate and a single call to an API. And because the data is rich data, you can actually pull out valuable insights to give the service you want to do for the individual with often very simple analytics. You know, yes, you can do some complicated things with AI, etc. But actually, it's amazing how much you can do when you get this rich data with the simplest analytics. So as an example, imagine you want to know what sports I'm interested in. Now, today, that's very difficult if you're not Facebook or Google. You might have to drop a cookie on my browser, try and follow me through the web, have all sorts of AI to try and work out which sites imply which. Or you could ask me direct for my social data for the last year and count up how many times I mentioned the top 50 sports. You're going to get a greater than 90% probability that you've got my sports. So if you do mine, and we've done this already, some people are doing it, you know, you see it's rugby, cricket with a bit of golf. No great surprise for me, perhaps. But all it required was a simple count up, count down algorithm. You also get much reduced data compliance costs. You can process data on device if you like, because you can always come back and get it again. You don't have to store it like a, you know, the nuts being stored by a squirrel over winter, right? You can come back anytime and redo analytics if you want. And of course, the key thing about this is you'll get the trust of individuals. And when you have a trusted relationship, individuals will share more. So it sounds brilliant. So is it real? Is it usable? Is it scalable? Well, it is real. I've shown you that as the video. But actually, just over a year ago, year and a half ago now, 2019, we did a big piece of work with the DCMS, the UK government, run by a great company, Control Shift, who are consultants in this area. And we worked with the BBC, Facebook, and others to show this whole thing working. So with companies giving the data back and using the data. So on both sides of the equation. And it won't surprise you to see that the conclusions: personal data sharing can be made safe, secure, very valuable services can be created. The breadth of data is important. This multidimensionality was done. It all exists. And this has really radical changes to complete infrastructures. So in health, this is actually known as patient-centricity. And around the world, this is a good site to talk about the future of patient data. For years, we've wanted patients to have their own data. Because when patients don't have their own data, They can be operated on with the wrong data. That's happened quite a few times, happens every year. My VP of Health has nearly had it done 3 times to him, which is why he's our VP of Health. He works in the health industry. He's committed to making this change. We can't have apps. It's almost impossible to have proper medical apps working on stuff because they don't have access to our data. We don't have access. It's stuck away in GPs and hospitals and stuff. That's no use. We can't go forwards in where we want to do. Research is crippled because it's so hard to get data. And I'll come back to that point with COVID a bit later on. But when we actually have our data, we open up a very rich patient-centric ecosystem. Whenever we deal with the healthcare system, whether that's where we live, when we move, when we're on travels, when we're doing video consultations, we've now got our full medical record. We can have health service apps and consumer apps. We can actually have research with rich longitudinal data. In fact, the chief medical officer of one of the world's larger pharma companies, I'm not allowed to mention which, did a full analysis on what patient centricity meant to them. And just in one area alone, that of creating new drugs, saved between 100 and 900 million per drug, would mean 2 more years in patent and increases the effectivity of what's known futility analysis. Sum and total means it's more economic to actually develop more drugs and for rarer items as well, let alone the need for this, as I said, for when we get to precision medicine. So a complete radical change in healthcare, and something that our health services have been wanting to do for years, but haven't really moved out on because they always think it's too difficult. It isn't difficult. We've already integrated with the GP systems in the UK. You just need an API, as you'll see, and the individual gets their data. And because of the individual holding it, it's private, secure, consented. But it also changes consumer personalization. And although there's a lot bad things said about consumer personalization because our data is being robbed behind us at the moment by being tracked, actually we as individuals like it. When you ask people, they love personalization. We want it, but we want it on our terms. And big studies and actual real things done. CX Loyalty is a very big company, MasterCard, you know, another very big company, and have proven this whole process and are in the process of doing it. And the same here with MasterCard, looking at how on earth can this work worldwide and providing that capabilities to all their merchants and issuers. And when you've got multi-dimensional data, as shown here, you can do almost anything, offers and stuff. And the opportunities are huge. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart. You can go to digi.me.use cases, but essentially wherever an individual interacts with a business, a service, a government, and there's personal data, the individual having it makes life easier. A good example we were working with in Australia was at the beginning of COVID. It didn't end up happening because they didn't have DigiB, but they wished they did, was and we know when lockdown happened, a lot of people had to get their food delivered. Now, of course, what the government wanted to do was to ask the supermarkets, could you reserve slots for those with a social need? And the supermarkets, of course, said yes. And the very next thing they said was, can you give us a list of everybody's names and addresses who have a social need? And the government went, crinkle, no, I can't. That would be a breach of privacy, which of course it would be. So how do we do it then? Can't do it. Couldn't do it. Never happened. And in the UK, you know, actually the government had to step in and provide their own food services. So, but it would have been easy because if the government had given back to individuals their social status as part of, you know, the exchange of data between the individual and the government. So you had that. When I was on, if I was on a social need, when I was on the supermarket app doing my shopping request, I could have ticked the box saying, I've got a social need, priority slot, please. Could have asked for my data from DigiMe and it would have been done. All privately and securely. And if I didn't want to declare that, then I didn't have to. And could have been done, actually, probably we worked it out with them in about a week, sum total end to end. An enormous lot of things are enabled. It's an enormous lot easier when you haven't got to do this with data, you've got this to an individual and then this out. It makes everything so much easier. So I want to finish up with a really live example. We've got the COVID vaccines. Brilliant stuff done to get them approved in months through phase 1, 2, 3 trials. If you know anything about trials, it's a hell of a manually intensive process to get the data for those trials, low tens of thousands, and get it done. Normally takes many years. Normally vaccines then come into the market direct from the pharma companies to GPs and others after they've been approved. They've got this direct link to the GPs, and they don't get much what's called real world evidence for post-market surveillance, but the GPs at least tell them if there's any adverse reactions, and they can see the effectivity over time. We don't have that luxury. We're in a situation now where we're vaccinating millions of people. We need data from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people now, digitally at scale. And we need to know, because we need to know, are the vaccines effective in the real world? Because real world effects are different from trials. What's the difference between the vaccines? Is there any difference between the different vaccination regimes? Second dose, 1 month, 3 months. Are the variants having any effect? How long's the immunization lasting for? We need data to counter the anti-vaxxers. So we need a data donor program. But how on earth do we do it? Because we need your vaccine data, self-assessments every day, and we need your medical data, and we need consent for that to go to a clinical data repository for researchers. It is not possible, even in the UK, which has one of the world's better health data systems, we can't bring those pieces of information together. So we can't do it. But actually, in a world where we've got it patient-centric, then the vaccine data, love to have it on API, but we don't, but you can scan the vaccine card. Self-assessments are done on the device. The medical data already comes in. Consent, one thing, it can go out. So we do have proposals with the UK government and others for a data donor program that brings this together. And the interesting thing is it can't be done without patient centricity. It cannot be done without this innovation. And so I just want to highlight, often innovations sound very complex. This is no more complex than data in, collected at the individual privately, data out. It is a very simple solution, but you have to have your mind that aggregation is at the individual. And because it's a simple solution in that sense, takes a bit of building, but it's a simple solution. Actually, it makes it easy to use the data. You don't have all these complex interrelationships. You can get data with one API call. You've only got to get the individual to say yes, and that's down to your value exchange. You get rich data, simpler algorithms. You have all the privacy, security, and consent solved, and you can do straightforward edge processing. So this empowers the personal data economy, increasing the velocity of personal data sharing, but with full privacy, security, and consent. We actually end up fixing the architecture of the personal internet. It's been brilliant the last 20 years. It got a bit tatty in privacy. Now we have the next evolution. It applies everywhere in the world, and it does do what I promised at the beginning, providing greater value to all, whether that's individuals, businesses, governments, and society as a whole. Thank you very much. Neil, I should hand back to you for questions.